It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top stories. Russia hits back at Ukraine with a large-scale missile and drone attack on Kyiv and other cities. Donald Trump considers selling his Tesla as his rift with Elon Musk deepens. A man mistakenly deported from the United States to El Salvador is returned to face people smuggling charges.
Davy Russell, Scottish Labour Party, 8,000.
Scottish Labour celebrates after beating both the SNP and Reform in a surprise by-election victory. Plus, commemorations in Normandy as veterans gather to mark the 81st anniversary of D-Day. David Beckham to receive a knighthood in the King's birthday honours list. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Moscow says its forces have fired hundreds of missiles and drones at targets in Ukraine in response to what it called terrorist acts against Russia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky described the attack as a barrage of strikes right across the country. And it came just a day after Russia's ambassador to the UK told Sky News that a response was coming to a series of strikes on Russian targets by Ukraine with British help. Our international editor Dominic Waghorn reports.
When it came, Russia's revenge was on the civilians of Ukraine, meted out on towns and cities the length and breadth of the country. This is Lutsk in the far west. These are thought to be cruise missiles flying in one after another, landing in residential neighbourhoods, igniting terrifying fireballs. This is Kharkiv, 600 miles to the east. Russia still claims not to target civilian sites. These are apartment blocks being struck by cruise missiles carrying payloads of 500 kilograms of explosives. The impact on the ground was as predictable as it was tragic. Emergency services rushing to rescue the injured where Russia's aerial onslaught came down. Others not surviving the attacks. In Chernihiv, in the north of the country, people described a night of terror.
Very bad, very bad. I was so scared, terribly scared. I jumped up. Luckily, since the war began, I had taped the window with duct tape. The glass, the shards, didn't get into the room.
It was very difficult. It was terrible. Our refrigerator is pierced through and there are no windows left on this side at all. The front door won't close. There's glass everywhere. We're clearing it up.
It was one of Ukraine's worst nights in months. President Zelensky called on the world to intervene and restrain the Russian aggression.
The most important thing we can achieve together is to end the war with a decent peace and create reliable security guarantees for Ukraine and for all of Europe, so that no one in Europe is afraid of being left without protection.
The aerial assault was retaliation for this. Ukraine's audacious drone attacks on air bases across Russia from the far north to the far east. Last night, Russia's ambassador to the UK told Sky News those attacks were a dangerous escalation.
We have a limited conflict right now, which, of course, has a wider projection on the European security. But limited conflict should stay a limited conflict and not to escalate it, not to try to engulf World War III. That's the worst case scenario that we can imagine.
A Kremlin spokesman justified last night's assaults as a necessary response to Ukraine's drone attacks on its bases.
All that happens as part of the special military operation, all that is being done by our military daily, is a response to the actions by the Kyiv regime that has acquired all the traits of a terrorist regime. And as for the overnight strikes in particular, if you attentively read the Russian Defense Ministry statement, it says that this is a response to the terrorist attacks by the Kyiv regime.
This may be just the beginning. Ukrainian intelligence is warning Russia has more such attacks planned as it continues to lash out in rage at the destruction of its bases. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett says Russia could retaliate further against Ukraine.
All week, Russia has been laying the groundwork for a response to the recent attacks it suffered by accusing Ukraine of escalation and by generally playing the victim, essentially trying to legitimise, I think, its inevitable riposte. And although we've seen the start of that response, I very much doubt we've seen the end of it, because at the moment the Kremlin has only said this is a response to what it called terrorist attacks. And that is how it's been referring to the bridge attacks last weekend, where 2 bridges on Russia's railway network were blown up, including one that collapsed onto a passenger train that was passing underneath, killing 7 people and injuring dozens more. No one's claimed responsibility for that attack, but Moscow has held Kyiv accountable and has called it a terrorist attack. So by saying it's a response to that, I think it's deliberately left the door open to a bigger response to the drone attack on Russia's long-range strategic bombers. That was an attack on part of Russia's nuclear triad, so I think it will see a more severe retaliation that is yet to come. And what's really been interesting to watch here in Moscow is how the official line has developed on that attack over the course of the week. To begin with, there was very little mention of it. The Kremlin didn't want to draw attention to it. But now the official line has become that Britain was complicit in it, with the suggestion being that London passed satellite data to Kyiv to help it locate its target, despite the UK denying having any prior knowledge of these attacks. And I think the reason for this is because this was a humiliating attack on Russia carried out by a much smaller opponent. By blaming a bigger power like the UK is a way of making it somehow less embarrassing for Russia.
Sir Keir Starmer has hailed Labour's surprise victory in the Hamilton by-election for the Scottish Parliament as proof that people want change. But David Russell won the seat by just 600 votes, and his victory came against the backdrop of national polls putting Scottish Labour in 3rd place behind the SNP and Reform UK. Our political correspondent Rob Powell reports now from Hamilton.
A new political outlook in central West Scotland as 3 parties scrap for attention. This election in Hamilton never looked academic for Labour. Just 600 votes separated them from the SNP. Those who looked again at both big parties less than happy.
I'm extremely disappointed with how the SNP has treated the people of Scotland. So we have to get a change, because I do feel exactly like the Tories did in England. The longer you have people in Parliament, the complacent they get.
The SNP has to get its house in order very, very quickly to be able to regain trust with a lot of Scottish voters. And I think that the Labour leadership will see this as a fantastic opportunity.
I'll be honest, I don't think any of them are doing any good. SNP have done nothing for Hamilton. You can see if you walk around here, all the shops are closed. You know, we need somebody to do something, and I'm not sure Labour will do it.
This area is also a monument to SNP success. A shock by-election win here in the 60s heralded a new era in Scottish politics. Long gone now.
We have a deeply unpopular Westminster Labour government putting policies out there that many detest across Scotland. But what does it say about the SNP that you still can't beat them?
What it says is that the SNP has made some progress since the election last summer, but not enough. And we've got to make more progress. That's the blunt reality of the election last night.
Scottish Labour Party, 8,000.
For Scottish Labour, relief amid falling polls, with Holyrood elections on the horizon.
How much can you conceivably do in Scotland when there's so many unpopular policies coming out of Labour in Westminster?
Well, we won this by-election against the odds. We proved the pundits wrong, the pollsters wrong, the commentators wrong and the bookies wrong. And I think they have to reflect on where they're getting their information, because never before have I seen a campaign where the national messaging was so alien from what was actually happening on the ground.
The sophistication of Labour's digital campaign and a local candidate both helped here in an area where the party did pick up widespread wins at the general election. But this isn't a turning point, especially when there's a new force in Scottish politics that's rapidly gaining momentum.
Reform finished a close 3rd from a standing start. Once a bogeyman north of the border, Nigel Farage now eating up the Tory vote here.
Oh, this looks fantastic. Oh my God, look at this.
But campaigners say that's not all.
There's a huge surge of young people from the SNP in particular, and particularly young men who are coming to us. Many of these young people who voted for independence have voted for the SNP now look at the situation and say, I want people to focus on the cost of living, I want somebody to focus on the NHS or education.
One election, but parallels with the wider view. Established parties leaking support, politics fracturing in multiple directions. Rob Powell, Sky News in Hamilton.
Let's go live to Westminster and speak to our political correspondent, Liz Bates. Liz, the Prime Minister is unsurprisingly sounding pretty buoyant. But is Labour under pressure in Scotland despite the victory?
Oh, certainly. And I think, yes, there will be a sigh of relief in Number 10 tonight. And this was, of course, a by-election in Scotland for the Scottish Parliament. But the repercussions will be felt here as well. And that's because every by-election takes the temperature of British politics. And I think there was real fear among activists in Scotland and here in Westminster that that Labour support that was gained north of the border at the general election was potentially drifting away in a way that we've seen across the country. Labour slumping in the polls. So they'll be happy that they hung on here. But of course, they will have one eye on that reform result, because in the end, 26% of the vote for reform, they came in third. Labour only on 31. So it was still a very close result. And what we're seeing yet again is reform surging from, as our reporter there said, Rob Powell, a standing start. This is despite having really no local infrastructure, no local history, relationship with the voters that they can lean on. And of course, in the shadow of this constant drama that is going on around the party in Westminster. We saw just yesterday their chairman, Zia Youssef, stand down. We saw this comes off the back of one of their MPs, Rupert Lowe, cutting ties with the party and standing as an independent. So, look, reform still surging ahead. And I think what this will show, and what this does show, is that there are really fewer and fewer limits as to the type of support they can gain. We saw them in the locals take support from the Conservative Party. They took a by-election from Labour, and now they are taking SNP support in Scotland. So that relentless progress of reform, once again seen in this by-election, despite Labour's victory, will be causing concern in Number 10 tonight.
It's with the latest there in Downing Street. Liz, thank you. Now, Donald Trump says he doesn't intend to talk to Elon Musk again for some time after their spectacular falling out. The pair have been trading jibes on social media, with Mr. Musk making unsubstantiated claims the US president's name appears in unreleased files about the pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Today, the White House let it be known that Mr. Trump is now considering selling his Tesla. Well, let's go live to Washington and our correspondent, David Blevins. David, I don't know whether we know whether Tesla has actually been sold, but certainly the row between Donald Trump and Elon Musk continues.
It certainly does, and it feels tonight like President Trump is seeking to wrestle back control of the narrative. Within the last hour, for example, he has confirmed that there will be high-level trade talks between the United States and China in London next week. We know the first round of talks were unsuccessful in Geneva, but we know that President Trump spoke with President Xi yesterday, and now it is our understanding that the US government asked the UK government to facilitate these talks. And I think that says something about the geopolitical standing of the UK right now. The President has also been posting about less significant matters this evening, like his plan to build a ballroom in the White House. So it feels very much like a case of look here, don't look over there. But given that we're talking about two alpha males, two people with big egos, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are both so unpredictable, it's very possible that the spat between them could escalate into a full-blown feud in the coming days.
And David, staying in the US, another big development tonight in the controversial case of Abrego Garcia, who was wrongly deported to El Salvador.
Yes, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was deported to El Salvador in violation of a court order preventing his removal from the United States. You may remember at the time that the White House described it as an administrative error. The Supreme Court ordered the White House to facilitate his return, but the administration said they couldn't do that. The president of El Salvador said he wouldn't do that, but things have now changed. The Maryland father has returned to the United States, and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, says he's been indicted on a charge of conspiring to transport undocumented migrants from Texas to other parts of the United States. This is what she had to say.
The grand jury found that over the past 9 years, Abrego Garcia has played a significant role in an alien smuggling ring. They found this was his full-time job, not a contractor. He was a smuggler of humans and children and women. He made over 100 trips, the grand jury found, smuggling people throughout our country. MS-13 members, violent gang terrorist organization members throughout our country.
In a statement this evening, a Democratic senator who travelled to El Salvador to campaign for Mr. Garcia's return to the United States said, "This has never been about the man. It has been about the constitutional right to due process." But in another statement, the White House press secretary, Caroline Levitt, made it very clear that they believe this to be about justice. And indeed, the Attorney General herself said that if Mr. Garcia is prosecuted here, is found guilty here, and imprisoned here in the United States, he's very likely to be deported again, and his own lawyer describes that as an abusive process.
David Blevins with the latest from Washington. David, thank you. The government has pledged to end corridor care in accident and emergency units with a £450 million investment in England. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says hundreds of thousands of patients will face shorter waits in A&E because of it. But doctors' leaders aren't convinced. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has more.
Some of his last words to me actually were, "Get me the hell out of here, I don't want to be here, I want to go home."
Alan Lishman had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, diabetes and heart disease when he fell and cut his head. He spent almost 2 days lying in a hospital corridor. His family told us he wasn't seen even once by a doctor. Alan died from an infection as a result of his fall.
It was 40 hours that he was in the corridor. We were told it was 36 hours for a bed. But then once we'd hit the 36-hour mark, they just kept saying, "I'm sorry, we haven't got anywhere, we haven't got a bed." Absolutely appalling. I mean, you wouldn't treat an animal how some of them patients are being treated.
NHS England wants to see less than 5% of patients waiting more than 4 hours in A&E before a decision is made on their care. This target hasn't been met in almost a decade. And that poor performance continues after admission, with the number of patients waiting more than 4 hours and 12 hours increasing significantly since the pandemic. Sky News reported this week from the Health Secretary Wes Streeting's local hospital. We show the King George's Emergency Department struggling to cope with rising numbers of mental health patients in crisis attending A&E. He says a government plan to create new mental health assessment facilities and 14 new same-day urgent and emergency treatment centres will help to lift some of that pressure.
I saw Sky's report, and I think what they have shone a spotlight on is not just in my local hospitals, but what I have seen in hospitals right across the country is far too many people turning up in busy, noisy, crowded A&E departments, not because they needed to be in A&E, but because the support they needed, the right care in the right place, wasn't available at the right time.
The plan itself admits that the health service's inability and unwillingness to work coherently, both internally and with social care and other service providers, has led to a deterioration in performance that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. Some senior emergency department figures are concerned it lacks ambition.
They've set an aspiration
that no more than 10% of people going to emergency departments should spend more than 12 hours there. Now, the problem is that's very unambitious. We've only had that sort of level of 12-hour waits in the last couple of years. If you go back to March 2021, that level was 2%.
Maureen says her family have lost faith in the NHS's ability to treat patients properly in A&E. And they're not the only ones. But it's hoped that this plan can restore some of that broken trust. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
David Beckham is to be knighted in the King's birthday honours next week. The former England football captain was awarded an OBE in 2003 on the recommendation of the then Prime Minister Tony Blair. But he's now set to receive further recognition. Sky's Amelia Harper reports.
It might have been this goal that put David Beckham on the global map. That 1996 kick from the halfway line for Manchester United. But in the years after, there was something else he also wanted to score. The former England football captain already has an OBE.
It's great to receive an honour for playing football, for something I love doing.
But now he's set to achieve his ultimate aim, a knighthood.
It's a great moment for English football in terms of it shows that what you can do if you apply himself. I mean, English football has had some great knights before, you know, the greatest of them all. So Bobby Charlton and Sir Alf Ramsey, individuals like that. I think for footballing reasons, he absolutely deserved it. And the real surprise of today is that it didn't happen before.
Beckham played for his country 115 times before retiring in 2013. His fame helping secure the London 2012 Olympics bid. As a UNICEF ambassador since 2005, speculation grew about a potential knighthood. He'd been on the verge of one here in 2014, but that was blocked after he was implicated in a tax avoidance scheme, which he was later cleared of. Then in 2017, his emails made the headlines, appearing to criticise the honours system itself. Hacked and doctored, his spokesperson said. Despite this, he became an ambassador to the King's Foundation, his role at the educational charity taking him to this year's Chelsea Flower Show. But for some, there are questions about his new appointment.
He'd have liked the knighthood a lot earlier, but he's got it finally, a reward for his stubborn determination and for his brilliant salesmanship. And that is to his credit. It's just that it's all about David Beckham. It's not about the charities. It's not about Britain. It is all about the Beckham brand.
Alongside the soon-to-be Lady Beckham, it seems his most prized goal has finally been scored. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
Well, Tottenham Hotspur insist they've made the right decision after sacking manager Ange Postecoglou. The Australian ended the club's 16-year trophy drought by winning the Europa League only 16 days ago. But he also presided over Spurs' worst Premier League season in history, losing 22 games. Sky's Dharmesh Sheth has more now from Tottenham's training ground in North London.
16 days after he masterminded Tottenham Hotspur's first trophy in 17 years, Ange Postecoglou has lost his job as the Tottenham Hotspur head coach. Yes, in their statement, Tottenham Hotspur did thank Ange Postecoglou for bringing the attacking football back to the club. They did thank him for that Europa League victory against Manchester United and giving the fans a night they will never, ever forget. But privately, I think there were concerns about Ange Postecoglou's tactics. Were they concerned, the Tottenham hierarchy, that maybe Premier League managers had worked out Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham Hotspur? Were they concerned also about the injury record under Ange Postecoglou? Far too many of their players had really long spells on the sidelines, the likes of Mickey van der Ven, Christian Romero, James Maddison, the goalkeeper Vicario, Destiny Udogie, to name but a few. But what really cost Ange Postecoglou his job was the league form. Yes, they did win a trophy, but they had a season which was deemed unacceptable. In a 38-game Premier League season, they had their lowest finish and their lowest points haul, 17th and 38 points from 38 games. And that, in effect, has what is done for Ange Postecoglou. What's next for Tottenham Hotspur? Well, they've said that they will announce their new head coach in due course. Some of the candidates are Premier League managers that are admired by the board here at Tottenham Hotspur, not least Bournemouth's Andoni Iraola, Fulham's Marco Silva and Brentford's Thomas Frank.
An expert on the BBC's Bargain Hunt programme has been jailed after failing to report the sale of artworks to a suspected Hezbollah financier. Ochuko Ojiri sold art worth £140,000 to a man with alleged links to the militant group. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, says she would leave the European Convention of Human Rights if it meant a better way of dealing with immigration. She says current laws around people seeking asylum aren't working. She's calling for a sustainable system, giving Parliament direct control over who comes to the UK.
Britain is being mugged. Our asylum system is completely broken and will require a fundamental rebuild so that the British government, not people traffickers, control it. That means a total end to asylum claims in this country by illegal immigrants and removing immediately all those who arrive illegally and try to claim asylum. We need a new sustainable system to admit strictly controlled numbers of those in genuine and actual need, with Parliament having the final say, not just on the rules, but the exact numbers coming in.
The family of a teenager killed in a car crash in Sheffield say he'd recently arrived in the UK from Yemen for a better future. 16-year-old Abdullah Yasser Abdullah Al-Yazidi was hit by a grey Audi on Wednesday and later died in hospital. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. Veterans gathered in Normandy today to mark the 81st anniversary of the D-Day landings. Allied troops landed on the beaches of northern France on this day in 1944 in a seaborne invasion which eventually led to the end of the Second World War. Sky's Ashna Hurinag reports.
Together, they remember the sacrifices they made on these shores 81 years ago. There aren't many D-Day veterans still with us, but what they represent stays with us. Along the coastline where they landed, international dignitaries gathered to mark the seismic and symbolic moment. Around 150,000 Allied soldiers arrived in Normandy to help secure the end of the Second World War.
Hey, Corporal. Good to meet you, Corporal.
The efforts of the American soldiers who gave their lives remembered by the US Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth.
In America and across the free world, we fight not because we hate what's in front of us, but because we love what's behind us. It's a special kind of love, a love that recognizes and understands that it requires sacrifice. You see, when I think of June the 6th, all I think of is the price of freedom.
That allyship, acknowledged and admired by nations wanting to strengthen the bond now more than ever. The actions that secured Europe's freedom, some are now fighting to retain.
We learned the true strength of alliances, the strength of our warfighters standing together as they continue to do on operations today. Personnel from Manchester, from Marseille, from Minnesota. The strength of our nations standing together in NATO to deter current conflicts and adversaries. The responsibility to safeguard D-Day's legacy of freedom rests today with us.
A responsibility we all bear as we cherish these last living witnesses, now aged between 99 and 102. Each anniversary only deepens its distinction. Ashna Harinag, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. Welcome both. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Daily Telegraph. The headline, "Fears over migrants are form of terrorism." Be right back.
Show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Moscow says its forces have fired hundreds of missiles and drones at targets in Ukraine in response to what it called terrorist acts against Russia. Donald Trump says he's not interested in speaking to his former aide, Elon Musk, after their relationship publicly imploded. And Sir Keir Starmer has hailed Labour's surprise victory in the Hamilton by-election for the Scottish Parliament as proof that people want change. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Financial Times hears advisors to Donald Trump and Elon Musk are urging them to put aside their differences amid concerns that their feud could harm them both politically and commercially. The Mirror describes the two men as babies at war. The Star, meanwhile, reports that Mr. Musk will no longer allow NASA to use one of his SpaceX rockets to ferry astronauts to and from the International Space Station. The Times leads on Sir Keir Starmer's plan to give the NHS a £30 billion boost in next week's spending review to improve the performance of the health service, reporting concerns it will compromise the needs of other departments. The Daily Mail leads with an investigation into illegal DIY weight loss injections being sold online, posing serious health risks. The Express reports the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch's description of the UK's asylum system as being mugged by undeserving applicants. And the Telegraph leads with concerns that fears of migrants are being classified as a form of terrorism under new Prevent guidance. And we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Zoe Williams. Great to see you both. Well, let's start with the big split, the end of the bromance between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Interestingly, Donald Trump was flying to play golf, and he didn't give the impromptu press conference he often does when he's about to board a plane. But let's start with the front page of the Mirror. Zoe, you start us off on this. Babies at war. What have you made of the past 24 hours?
Well, so basically, the Mirror is taking a line which many commentators are taking in America as well as over here, which is that we're just looking at two babies or toddlers or, you know, unformed egos. And it's definitely true that you are looking at egos which haven't been kind of mediated into adulthood, into any kind of sensible version of how an adult behaves around his
Which
peers.
tweets stood out for you?
Well, what really stands out is that they're levelling extraordinary accusations at one another. You know, Musk's kind of intonation around Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein is incredibly problematic for both Trump and also Musk. You know, this isn't new news to him, so he knew that all the time he was supporting him. And it's incredibly undignified to watch. But what I find really dismaying as a member of the global public is that they are like 3-year-olds or maybe 7-year-olds, and yet we're having to analyse them as though they're reasonable adults. And I think it really does pollute everything. It pollutes all of our perception of current affairs, and it pollutes the way people talk to each other.
Benedict, I mean, they may be acting like babies according to the Mirror, but they're very powerful babies.
Yeah, I think that's probably they're both easily in the top 10 most powerful people in the world. So this is a pretty sizable split. It's a clash of personalities, two personalities who are not used to being told no or not getting their way, or when they are told no, being able to bulldoze their way through that kind of opposition. But it's also, they are, if you like, the figureheads of two different strands of republicanism, which were always going to end up clashing at some point as well. It's not just about the egos, it's also the ideologies. Donald Trump is somebody who wants to spend quite a fair bit of money because he wants to reward his base, he wants to bring industry back to the US, that's going to involve a lot of spending. Whereas, of course, Elon Musk has made his whole thing about trying to get rid of government waste, trying to shrink the size of the federal government. And when you have these two very different strands of right-wing populism and they sort of come together in this way, it was inevitable that actually this breakup didn't happen because of, you know, an argument over personality or anything like that. It happened because of a bill. It happened because of legislation. So that was always going to be the thing that actually hit the buffers. If they were both aligned on ideology, it's entirely possible that they could have carried on happily, indefinitely. But when it's actually a question of legislation being put forward, that is obviously where the breaks happen.
But they you know, to describe the big, beautiful bill as the kind of ideological execution of Trump's big plan is fanciful. He said himself that he was just responding to some amorphous sense that the voters didn't like what he was saying before, so now he was going to say something slightly different. Trump doesn't have any coherent kind of notion of what a big state or a small state or a responsible state or a good state looks like. He reacts kind of amoebically to whatever's on the plate in front of him.
I'd agree with that. He responds like the average modern American politician, which is to reward your voters, and that means spending money.
Well, let me just bring, before we continue, let's look at the FT Weekend front page there. They have an angle to this story, but that is that allies of both Trump and Musk are urging them basically to make up after the rift because of fears of the MAGA political agenda. And it's people like Ted Cruz and then various tech figures.
There are a number of worries in this piece. One of them is among a lot of Elon's investors. You know, he's not taking any calls, and even people who have billions invested in his companies aren't getting the kind of treatment they're used to from Elon Musk because he's having this very kind of public tantrum. At the same time, obviously, Trump's camp, and it's extraordinary to describe the President of the United States as having a camp against his major donors camp, but Trump's camp is very worried about, you know, it looks pretty assured that the bill is going to pass, but Elon Musk's explosion will have emboldened the anti-bill voices within the Republican Party, and that's going to loosen Trump's grip on the people he's trying to keep on side. So nobody benefits from this. It's not like Elon Musk is walking off into a sunset with an alternative agenda that he can easily prosecute. He's just walking off with a huge amount of resentment while Trump is kind of weakened and confused. That, I think, is why figures like Ted Cruz are asking them to kiss and make up. But the problem is they can't because they have no sense of decorum or deferred gratification.
Elon Musk is trying to reach out a little bit, though, hasn't he?
I think he's woken up the morning after his rant and realised he might have gone too far this time. Yes, I think he is, in his own way, trying to maybe reduce the tension slightly. I don't really know how much you can, and I think Donald Trump is probably not the sort of person who would respond particularly well to that.
No.
But no, that this is true. This has longer-term political ramifications. Trump is his own kind of edifice, but what actually is the MAGA movement? What is the Republican Party beyond Donald Trump? Everybody else, your Ted Cruz's, your J.D. Vances, are going to be sat there twiddling their thumbs going, this doesn't make us look particularly good, does it? And we're the ones that are going to be left with this mess in 4 years' time.
Let's just look at the front page of the Daily Star, because obviously the balance of power kind of like, you know, falls a little bit towards Donald Trump. You know, he is the president of the US. But this story highlights how actually Elon Musk's SpaceX does have an impact. And so it's not that easy for Trump just to dismiss Elon Musk. Zoe?
Well, is it not that easy? I mean, obviously, Musk has SpaceX, and the contracts with the Pentagon are absolutely eye-watering. So there's no obvious replacement. There's no obvious way to replace this technology. But actually, Trump does have significant power, even greater power than a regular president, over all businesses of all kinds, and that is to do with the tariffs. You know, he can bring a sector or an individual within a sector or a company within a sector completely to rack and ruin just by making their life difficult with tariffs. And that was part of the point of the tariff policy in the first place.
I'm sure we'll talk about this again very, very soon. We're going to have to move on to some of the day's or tomorrow's other stories. If you look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Benedict, this to you. Fears over migrants are a form of terrorism. Now, this is something that was picked out of the Prevent program's website, which is about de-radicalization. And I guess their definition of cultural nationalism. What is this?
I mean, this is, as ever with the Prevent strategy, there's always slight concerns as to whether or not there's sort of overreach. This is about whether or not voicing concerns over migration, not specifically just migration, though other aspects that might be linked to it amongst younger people might be a sign of radicalisation. And I think it's important, you know, when you read that sort of fear of migrants as a form of terrorism, that's not, most people would not consider that extremism, but it's when you sort of get down into the details there and you can see topics like ethno-nationalism, white supremacism, that's more the sort of seen as, if you like, a gateway towards going off towards slightly more extreme things. That obviously is very concerning, but this is not couched in particularly helpful language when, if we're being honest, the big topic of conversation in the mainstream today is migration, and it is not the right. It is people who vote all sorts of parties are suddenly beginning to see this.
Speaking of language, I'm actually very surprised at how strongly I agree with you. When you've got the Prime Minister saying we will become an island of strangers, you cannot then describe concerns over migration as terrorism unless you describe the Prime Minister as a terrorist.
Then we can refer him to Prevent right now on air.
But the funny thing is that I spoke to somebody who knew a lot about Prevent. They weren't involved with it, but they'd done a lot of research into it. And they said, actually, a lot of the markers of radicalisation and the kind of material you read would be fulfilled by the Telegraph.
Well, let's go to the Daily Express. Let's see what the leader of the Conservatives said in a speech earlier today. Britain being mugged in asylum claims mess again.
I mean, Kemi Badenoch is struggling for relevancy. That's being polite. The Conservatives have got this idea at the moment that if you were to solve the issue around migration and all the other ills, you need to address the European Convention on Human Rights, and that actually we need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, there may be good arguments for that. I'm sure I could make lots of good arguments for it now. I don't, in fact, think that this is something that is at the forefront of the minds of the average voter. They're not in the mood for that kind of... Yeah, it's quite clear that this wants to be turned into a referendum. The public is not in the mood for that sort of thing. And also, what we have not heard from any of these people that say, let's leave the ECHR is, OK, what are you going to replace it with? Because I don't think the public also trust the average Conservative MP to come up with something better.
That's the thing. Basically, migration is a carrier issue for anybody who wants to say, your life is terrible and I know how to fix it simply. And that's Nigel Farage's offer. You know, I can do a simple fix and your life will be better, you will be richer. But when Conservatives do it, after the amount of time they had in power, after the rises in migration that occurred under their watch, after the complete disconnect between their language, their promises and what actually happened, they just end up making fools of themselves and fools of us.
OK, we're just going to have to leave it there. Because coming up, Luke's father, who art Darth Vader. No, we'll explain it, I promise. We'll look at one survey's startling comparison of Star Wars and the Lord's Prayer after the break.
Over there, to your left. There have been airstrikes every day. Hezbollah are very sensitive about us showing any pictures, and we're being hurried away right now.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armory.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
It's trying to hit us. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We were the first journalists and the only outsiders to reach the site of the attack several weeks after it happened.
We found from the missile.
It's very difficult to see what around here could be conceived of as a legitimate military target. Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, a boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Benedict Spence and Zoe Williams. Zoe, let's start with you. Let's look at the front page of The Times. And the headline there, squeeze on services to pump cash into the NHS. Now, obviously, it's the big spending review coming up next week. So the Prime Minister wants to push a lot of money into the NHS, thinks that that's what might change his fortunes in the coming election.
I think it does, actually. I mean, and I very rarely feel sorry for the Labour government at the moment, but I do feel sorry for them a little bit when I look at this spending review, because basically, probably 30 billion is the minimum the NHS needs to do all the things they promised in their manifesto, from, you know, reducing waiting times to reducing A&E crises to accessing dental care. Like, there's so much need in the health services that you can't not spend that money, let alone with the pay freeze having been in force for so long for public sector workers that doctors are, you know, always ready to go on strike, and I think rightly so. But it's not landing the way it as a kind of Blairite act of generosity, precisely because all the language coming ahead of it has been about cuts to disability benefits, cuts to carers benefits, measures which will make people's lives so much harder that waiting less time in A&E is not going to do it for them.
Because the whole point of the story, Benedict, is that the 30 billion to go into the NHS are obviously going to come from somewhere else.
Yeah, and the Times mentions things like policing, which, given that we were also talking about another issue, is criminality, it's law and order, it's prisons, it's things like that. So when you already have that many other public services that are under strain, that are not performing, and of course, the other thing that we're being told about is we're going to need more money for defence. Well, if you wanted a bigger example of a money pit than the NHS, the MOD is an absolute disaster.
I'd actually forgotten about defence.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. We do forget about defence until a war pops up, and then we go, oh, yes, oh, no, that's terrible. This is really bad. It's a disaster, but we're going to be pouring more money into this. And that's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy of all of this. All of these things need money. If you don't give them the money, they rise to the top of the issues that people are very unhappy with. And, again, sort of feel a bit sorry for them because this is not their fault. They inherited this. But that's politics.
That is politics. Yeah, you fight to get elected. You're fighting to get elected to what you inherit, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that goes in the spending review. Mirror, page 7. Zoe, this to you, Crackdown. It's about pirate fire sticks, and you know all about them. I mean, not because you have you just happen to know a lot about them.
Let the record show that I don't even support a team. But I feel like the phrase dodgy fire stick went into my head as one whole portmanteau word, because as soon as a fire stick existed, a fire stick, of course, is the way to access legal streaming services which you pay for, like Netflix and Prime. There has been a way to get illegal services, like, you know, Premier League football games. You can get them off European apps. You can just sideload your Fire Stick with dodgy apps and get things for free, which otherwise would cost you a lot of money. I mean, we're sitting right in the heart of Sky. We know how much sport costs, right? So what I think is unusual about this story is that the maximum prison sentence under the new legislation, which hasn't yet gone through, would be 5 years. But, like, I know quite a lot of people I know have a fire stick, a dodgy fire stick. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
I'll show them the story.
Obviously, nobody I'm related to, but, like, quite a lot of people I know. Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is toppy. You know, you get less time in prison for arson.
I'm going to say it shows what the priorities of this country are. It's football. That's actually what we really care about.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I mean, I am not somebody. I've watched a lot of football, but I was not, in fact, aware of the existence of a dodgy fire stick.
Yeah, you say that, Benedict.
No, I'm really dull. I'm really dull. I let other people have the dodgy fire sticks, and then I listen and watch their reactions on Twitter in real time. That's how I follow football, and you can see it all happening in real time. But yeah, so there's a tip: don't break the law. or stay on Twitter for your whole life. That's really
such a wonky way to watch football. I'm sorry.
It's either that or pay for Sky Sports, which, as you pointed out, is a very pricey deal.
Sorry,
but
we didn't
well
mean
worth
But
it.
yeah, exactly. Great value for money. I just tasted that. But on a final story, page 3 of the Times, the Lord's Prayer forces out Star Wars in quotes poll. So they had a poll about the most recognizable words, and perhaps surprisingly, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, maybe it is, the Lord's Prayer has come out on top. What was the competition?
Well, Benedict thinks that this wasn't a fair competition, right? Because everybody gets told the Lord's Prayer every day at school for their entire lives.
It's beaten into them, depending on the school you went to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem like
I feel like that about Star Wars. I feel like I've seen it way more often than I wanted to.
Presumably the phrase is what? May the Force be with you? What's the actual phrase?
I think it's definitely not give us this day our daily bread.
Yeah. No, I meant from Star Wars, obviously.
Yes, may the Force be with you.
I think it's May the Force be with you, but I think it's I am your father as well.
Okay.
Yes,
no, that's true.
The thing is...
but also people, that they can correctly identify Churchill quotes, Shakespeare quotes. You'll Never Walk Alone is not just a football anthem, it comes from something else. So
and also Charles Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
I'm quite impressed by that.
Yeah, no, I suppose it's nice to know that it is not all just sort of pop culture references, that it's stuff that's...
Star Wars is quite pop culture.
I said not all pop culture references. I suppose Shakespeare was pop culture.
Yeah.
I suppose the Bible was as well at the time, when it was really getting popular, really getting off the ground.
Yeah, when people were really getting into it.
Yeah, it's all just pop culture in the end.
But it'd be interesting, like the people that chose the Lord's Prayer, do they just know the first sort of few words, or how many would
fewer people can pick up lines from the national anthem than they can the Lord's Prayer.
But once you know a bit of the Lord's Prayer, it kind of suggests itself, It's like once you're forgiving us our trespasses, you kind of think, well, OK, we may as well forgive those who trespass.
Fair enough.
OK.
Lead us not into temptation. Are you sure?
Yeah. And on that note,
Great.
Zoe, Benedict, thank you both so much. I'll see you at the top of the hour. Thank you. And coming up next on Sky News at 11, hundreds of drones and missiles. Russia hits back for Ukraine's air base attack. I'll have more on that and all the day's other stories at the top of the hour.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right, i.e. fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.